Don't eat that. You know it gives you the sugar shakes.
Sugar shakes?
Yeah, we don't know the word for diabetes.
It's diabetes.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm losing my mind.
Look, if you haven't seen the Hulu original Solar Opposites yet, I'm here to tell you, you're missing out. This show is something else. And I say that from a place of a ton of skepticism, on my part especially, because this show was created by Rick and Morty alumni Justin Roiland and Mike McMahan. And while Justin Roiland had been working on a ton of projects and games, this was his first TV show since Rick and Morty, so I was wondering for a long time if they were going to be able to pull off a whole new sci-fi sitcom without being trapped under the shadow of the mega success that is Rick and Morty. I mean, they had the odds stacked against them, both of the creators coming off of Rick and Morty, a show that's still in production. And yeah, at first I was a little bit worried that it would just kind of be rehashing the same formula. I mean, we literally made a video on it, but I will say that version of me is dumb and wrong. Take that past me. But it's clear that there's something deeper here, something more than just another cartoon. Solar Opposites proved that Justin Roiland is not only capable of making other TV shows, but he has officially reached the upper echelons of cartoon creators and created his own style that can be emulated and repeated very successfully. Guys, this is how Solar Opposites created a genre. Allow me to elaborate on that point. Real quick, guys, I just want to give a quick thank you to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. ExpressVPN is an incredible service that enables unrestricted access to all parts of the internet while keeping you safe and secure. With forces like hackers, spyware, and slow internet speeds breathing down your neck, Express is able to encrypt and hide your IP address, making it look like you're in a different part of the world, preventing hackers from creeping in and stealing your information when you're connected to unencrypted networks like at airports, hotels, and coffee shops. It's super easy. All it takes is a literal press of a button and can be accessed on your computer, tablet, or smartphone. Something that I love about ExpressVPN actually comes in handy now more than ever. It gives you way more shows and movies on streaming. Case in point, if I change my VPN location to the UK, suddenly I have Rick and Morty and Final Space. That is not in America. Even with YouTube, sometimes videos are region locked, and ExpressVPN allows me to bypass that with no hassle. ExpressVPN is the fastest VPN in the market, with glowing reviews, 24/7 customer service, and easy access. And you can get 3 months free with a 12-month plan only by clicking this link in the description, expressvpn.com/theroundtable. Again, this free 3 months is in addition to the 12-month plan at expressvpn.com/theroundtable. Take back your internet privacy today. So it's not unfamiliar that television creators have their own style, and animation is no different. I could point to obvious classics like Seth MacFarlane. You know it's a Seth MacFarlane show. Look at those mouths. You know it's iconic and terrifying. Adult animation in particular can definitely be divided up into subgenres or subcategories that stem from the style of the creator itself. We recognize the Seth MacFarlane shows as Seth MacFarlane shows. Family Guy, The Cleveland Show, and American Dad all have a similar art style, family dynamic, and gimmicks. Same goes for Matt Groening, one of the most, if not the most, legendary animated sitcom creator of all time, with mega classics like The Simpsons, Futurama, and now Disenchantment on Netflix. Although only one show has a nuclear family dynamic and premise, all his shows function as ensemble casts, with identical patterns of comedic delivery and smart comedy, and the point being, besides the art style, you know when you're watching a Matt Groening show. And in terms of adult animation, there hasn't been a new kid on the block in quite some time. I'm talking about adult animation that transcends into mainstream mascots, but now it is abundantly clear that that new kid on the block is Rick and Morty. I don't have to go into this. You know Rick and Morty is popular. You know everybody watches it. You see ads for it everywhere. Not to mention the merch and the memes. It has essentially grabbed pop culture by the throat and has not let go. Adding it to streaming changed everything as well. Roiland even acknowledged in an interview that most viewers watch through binging and streaming. One thing that Rick and Morty always had going for it was its own sense of identity and style. From the jump, from the art style to the voices to the backgrounds. And Rick and Morty's art style became influential in the mainstream. I mean, think about it. How many mainstream celebrities and musical artists you see that not only have given a nod towards Rick and Morty, but shared fan art, or have even had professional art made of them in the Rick and Morty style? I'm talking rap album covers, especially for mainstream artists, or just scrolling through any social media platform, the Rick and Morty art style became brand recognition. Enough so where that alone can now help a show get picked up. It's no secret that Solar Opposites definitely got legs from the foundation of Rick and Morty. Not to say that was the only reason. The show has an excellent premise, and they made quality television, but come on, I mean, they advertised from the creators of Rick and Morty in the trailer. They knew what they were doing. And that iconic sense of style from Rick and Morty was definitely not an accident. In fact, all of the credit goes to the two creators, Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland. Now, speaking of Dan Harmon, let's talk about him first. This man is one of the most prolific legends in television industry, hands down. Before Rick and Morty, he already had a hit show with Community on NBC, which is now recognized as one of the greatest TV shows of all time. It's critically acclaimed, it has a cult fan base, and personally, I feel like Community works so well because for being a live-action sitcom, it followed cartoon logic. Even even when grounded in live-action tropes and scenarios. So it made sense that Dan went on to make one of the most successful cartoons of our generation. His writing style and incredible knack for the modern sitcom, along with pop culture homages and meta-comedy, is the DNA for this show, and it works. I mean, season 1 was basically all movie parodies. But what Solar Opposites, a show made without the involvement of Dan, shows us is that the other half of the Rick and Morty brain is starting to establish his own style. I think it's time we give him recognition for it. I'm of course talking about Justin Roiland. Justin Roiland has always had his unique brand and style from the jump. Look at any of his weird pilots and short films he made before the success of Rick and Morty, and they feel like Rick and Morty. I'm talking Roiland TV, classic shorts like Relative Insanity, of course the original Doc and Marty short, which is cursed beyond belief, The Unmarketables. He's kind of been doing the same shtick for a while, and it's been working. Even down to the characters he voiced. His own style and flair is apparent. From Lemon Grab to Blyndon Blandon, Justin has one of the most recognizable voices in all of television, and the fact that he voices Rick and Morty is pretty impressive. The honest-to-God best way to experience the earliest yet longest example of Roiland's style and writing is the slept-on cartoon Disney's Fishhooks, where he served as a voice actor for one of the main characters, Oscar, alongside a story writer. A lot of the mannerisms and comedic delivery of Rick and Morty characters, especially Morty, can be found in Oscar, while a lot of the weird twists and implementations of multiple species in an adventure can be found in any episode he's worked on. Convenient, of course, since Fishhooks took place inside of a pet store, but still. But that's why I love Justin's Solar Opposites character Corvo so much. It's not what you'd expect from Justin, but he kills it regardless.
People are stupid. Why did they make so many languages? Why didn't they just get together and figure out one language so when I go to a Mexican restaurant I can just order cheese tube and not have someone roll their eyes at me?
Now, as for Solar Opposites as a show, does it stand alone on its own? It totally does. In fact, I would argue that it's an entirely different beast and deserves its own separate recognition. But despite all of that, it cannot escape the fact that in some ways, it is kind of Rick and Morty, and that's okay. Despite all of its glaring differences, Rick and Morty's style is totally represented in Solar Opposites, but that's not a bad thing. You can watch Futurama and say, hey, that looks like The Simpsons, but it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it for what it is. The same thing applies here. Sure, it's another sci-fi sitcom, but it has a whole different family dynamic with different characters, and it still manages to stand on its own and keep things fresh. In an interview the creators did with Decider, they shine light on this show's relation to Rick and Morty. McMahan said, "We didn't actually set out intending to differentiate it. We were writing Rick and Morty at the same time. All the characters were different and the type of show was different. We wanted it to be funny, but we wanted it to feel like a sitcom and serialized, and just about these characters, and not about a space genius and his grandson, you know? So let's break down the similarities and differences before we talk about why they matter. Sure, there's a lot of traces of improvised humor here. It also has its fair share of cool sci-fi concepts that aren't taken seriously and even applied to the suburban family life, heavy pop culture references and critiques. It is another family in the suburbs being influenced by sci-fi antics, and the writing style, including Dan Harmon's story circle, is certainly influenced by Rick and Morty, but it would make sense that Roiland would adapt from his writing partner in crime, and Mike McMahan was a writer on Rick and Morty. But that being said, there are still an incredible amount of differences between the two shows. Justin Roiland chimed in saying, yeah, I think by default, the characters are so different than Rick, and Rick really is the centerpiece of Rick and Morty. He's driving everything in the world kind of revolves around him, and he's a pretty tortured, dark individual with all kinds of unknown things about him. And in our show, we've got 4 aliens that are, for the most part, pretty naive. It's about a family, but it's a different family dynamic, and the characters from both shows can't be aligned as easily as Peter could be to Stan or Lois to Francine. Corvo and Yumulek both have a little bit of Rick. Terry and Jesse both have a little bit of Morty and Summer. I'm sure more comparisons could be drawn, but with Rick and Morty, its structure typically means a certain plot will have a certain tone depending on the roster of characters. A Rick and Morty A plot is going to feel very different from a Beth and Jerry B plot, to the point where it can create a slight disconnect, which some have called the weakest part of the show. However, with Solar Opposites, with similar traits being assigned to multiple characters, which narratively is intentional to an extent since Jesse is a replicant of Terry, it enables both the A and B plots to carry the same comedic consistency without necessarily being about the same thing. It's just sillier, but there's still a lot of dark stuff that we do because aliens don't know what's right and wrong. Mike says, yeah, it's almost like Rick realizes that life is chaotic, and Solar Opposites is like about 5 aliens that studied for the wrong test. The meta humor also has a different atmosphere to it, making fun of Hulu's ads and who gets them, the show usually using meta humor to pick on itself rather than the audience. As a whole, Solar Opposites is the silver lining bright side to the universe that Rick and Morty shuns away from. The idea that nothing matters. The existential dread and nihilism does not work in a show with frequent consequences, where in order to achieve their goal of fitting in and learning Earth culture, the characters have to be proactive. They can't afford to be as nihilistic as Rick. Plus, this is the only show I've seen that's had like an overarching C plot and then an entire episode dedicated to it. Shout out to the Wall plot line. That was a trip. When Decider asked about the humans in the Wall subplot, saying that it's the only indicator that the series was serialized, and asking whether or not they intended for that to happen, McMahan said, that was a big selling point for us when we pitched it to Hulu. We knew we wanted to build in a serialized aspect of the show, that we had already broke it all out in advance of pitching it. It was a big reason to do a show that wasn't like shows we'd worked on before. The main thing I got from these interviews is that they're really trying their hardest to just make a good show, and that when you've worked on as many shows as these two have, especially one as big as Rick and Morty, you do get, as he called it, echoes from the past, or accidentally repeating a storyline. In fact, it's kind of incredible that Solar Opposites managed to do so many things originally on its own, and it's something that I give it credit for. And that's why I feel like we'll be seeing a lot of future shows just like it. Again, this feels like the start of its own genre, like with other major adult cartoons. We've seen the Groening formula, which is heavy use of visual gags, humor grounded in real-world concepts, writing for the characters, not the joke, social commentary, and regardless of the cast, keeps its stories human with real emotional moments. Likewise, we've seen the MacFarlane formula. Shotgun comedy relying more on direct social commentary with tons of pop culture references, cutaways are way more prevalent aside from American Dad, the characters are vehicles to tell jokes more than anything else, and there's shows that love being crude and goofy as an escape from the world. But now we're finally starting to see the Roiland, Harmon, McMahan, Rick and Morty formula. A focus on a flawed family, improvised humor, interwoven serialized narratives, appeal to the human condition and existential values, abundance of meta humor, and like the Groening formula, the heartfelt or serious moments are authentic and have weight to the world and characters. The main takeaway from all of this should be that Rick and Morty isn't just a flash-in-the-pan success, it's a tried and tested formula. Its influence is huge, and it's changed what it means to be an adult animated sitcom. It's more than just a goofy show, it's a blueprint for what successful adult animation can be without just being The Simpsons or Family Guy or Bob's Burgers. But there's no doubt in my mind that this isn't the last Justin Roiland-style project we'll see. He's got his hands in so many separate pots, including a successful career in VR gaming. This probably won't be his last cartoon, far from it, but we'll just have to wait and see. In the meantime, watch Solar Opposites if you can. It's really good, and I'm sure it needs our support, even though it's having a season 2. Yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot of animation talk. But with all that said, I want to know what you guys think about all this. Do you think that there really is a new style here? Do you think that we're over-exaggerating? Do you believe it has legs or not? Let us know in those comments down below, or tweet to us at Roundtable Vids or me at @StretcherNemo. If you want to consider helping out the Roundtable, you can support us on Patreon or become a member of the channel and get exclusive access to scripts and avatars. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the Roundtable for more incredible cartoon content. As always, I'm Nemo, and I'll see you next time. Peace.